Hello, and welcome to my very dark van with my very ominous lighting. I am not in Mia's house today because she had some car troubles and she got stranded somewhere, so she couldn't be back at her place to let me in. So, we're doing it in the van today, so that's fun. So I like to start all Bible studies with a quick breathing exercise, as always. So, well, like, I don't know why I keep saying it's quick. It's not quick. You take your time with breathing exercises, okay? But it is just 3 deep breaths. So if you wouldn't mind doing that with me now, we're just going to take 3 deep breaths. So go in and out and in and out. Fantastic. So after the breathing exercise, I like to play a quiet worship song, just to kind of further the meditative headspace. I can't play it now because of copyright reasons. So for those watching on YouTube, if you go into the description of the video, then you're going to see a link for quiet worship, and you can actually just pause this video, click on that link, and like listen to that song. Maybe you can kind of sing along to it, do some more deep breathing, or sway along to it, like whatever gets you into that meditative headspace. Do that, and then when you're done, come back to this video. Okay, sound like a plan? So you can pause the video to do that right now. And you're back. I hope that was lovely for you, because it's a lovely song. So after that, I'd like to do a little written prayer thing that I do for every study. So I'm going to do that now. So God, thank you for bringing us all here tonight. Please guide my tongue and heart during this teaching, and guide everyone during the discussion and prayer time. Please help us to be a reflection of your light by enlightening us to your ways with love, patience, and curiosity. We love you, God. Help us to love each other like you love us. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, so now getting into the actual... Well, we're not actually getting into the teachy part, because we have an announcement before I start. I'm sure you guys have heard it, but just in case anyone hasn't, it's going to be the last time I make this announcement, but I just want to make sure everyone has heard. You might have noticed that there wasn't a video last week, and that was on purpose. For those that have missed both the Facebook post and the announcement video, I decided to start posting every other week from now on. I was just getting a little stressed out, putting all these studies out on top of all of the other work I gotta do to keep myself alive. I just wasn't getting enough sleep, and it was making me very cranky. So we're doing this now, and I'm happy about it because it gave me time to do that rebranding I've been meaning to do, which I'm sure you guys have noticed by now. No longer are we Damaja's Bible Study, but now we are the Least of Us Ministry. As perhaps the people on the new YouTube channel have of the same name have figured out. The name is based off of my favorite quote from Jesus, which paraphrases, whatever you do for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you do for me. Now, I was originally going to make it the least of these ministry, but Google informed me that at least 3 different ministries have that exact name. So never mind. I guess I'm just not as original as I thought. So, but I actually kind of like Least of Us more. Like, that was actually my original thought before I like looked up the verse to double check that it was right. But I like Least of Us more. It just gives it more of like a personal feel. Plus, the acronym for it is LOOM, which I very much love. But the reason, excuse me, my GERD's acting up. The reason that I wanted that for a name, though, is because I want this to be the kind of church that prioritizes the bottom rung of society type of people. However big this grows, I don't want a big, glossy mega church. I want a space that is made for the community, where the homeless and troubled youth can stay, as well as other people who are generally rejected by society, ex-convicts, sex workers, LGBT plus, even people of like differing beliefs. They can all feel welcomed and take refuge and learn about God, learn about the God who has always loved them. But even right now, where it's just me and my phone and maybe just like 10 people who listen off and on, I just want to promote that vibe to the best of my abilities as I can now. I want the church to help people again. So with that said, I'm going to be posting a GoFundMe link in the description for my cousin, who we've been praying for as she grieves the loss of her husband. She needs money for the funeral, and she's going to be moving as well. So she's asking for about 30,000, but whatever you can give will be appreciated. I'm sure. I'm personally gonna slide her a 50, so it's not just me asking, but leading by example. I don't want this to be a church of thoughts and prayers. I want it to be one of prayers and follow through action. So I hope that you will put a little something in there for the cuz. But that's about it for the update. Probably going forward, as I do want there to be like an actual specific charity thing we do, but like I think right now it's just going to be like whatever randomly pops up. So right now it's going to be my cousin, but yeah, that's it for the update. Thanks for bearing with me, and welcome to this new chapter, both in this study that we're about to do and this ministry, as well as this new channel. But let's get back to the study part. We're going to be switching to the Amplified translation, which apparently tries to give more context to the original text. So it's gonna, I know that there's a word for it. There's like the literal ones, and then there's like literal translations, and then there's the more like trying to make it make sense for this time. So that's kind of looks like where the Amplified version is. It's like trying to make it make sense for this time. So let's just see how they do with Genesis 21. So Amplified version starts out with, in Genesis 21, the Lord graciously remembered and visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for her as he had promised. So Sarah conceived and gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age, at the appointed time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham named his son Isaac, which means laughter, the son to whom Sarah gave birth. Okay, so God fulfills his promise to Abraham and Sarah, not because they were perfect and deserved it, but because he said he would. But the way that this is phrased, it just sounds like a little bit off to me, and it like bugged me a little bit. So God visited Sarah and did for her what he promised, and then she gave birth to a son for Abraham, like not Abraham's son, but the son was for Abraham. It just makes it sound like God was the one who impregnated Sarah, not Abraham, which doesn't sound right to me. That's not, at least it's not like the version that I grew up hearing. And all Christian scholars do agree that Abraham is the biological father, but they don't seem to acknowledge or care about the weird phrasing, which doesn't help. I did find one Jewish website, which I'll be linking in the description. But it seems that, this Jewish website, it seems to be run by a lot of smart people that have like college degrees and that like study this kind of stuff. And they also agree that the phrasing seems to suggest divine conception. Something about this however, just offends my Christian sensibilities, because Jesus is supposed to be the only one who was divinely conceived. And what does it mean if Isaac was also? Especially since Jews are supposed to be descended from Abraham. Are we meant to take more of an adoption narrative if this is the case? Now, most Christian scholars do say that there was divine intervention for Sarah to conceive, obviously. Only God could cause a 90 to 100-year-old couple to conceive a child, so it's a miraculous birth in that sense. But Sarah and Abraham were still definitely fucking themselves, so Isaac is naturally and biologically Sarah and Abraham's son. And, don't act shocked that old people fuck. Old people are notoriously horny, actually. Ask any nursing home worker. But it wasn't a virgin birth like it was with Mary, either way. So most likely when they're saying that God fulfilled his promise and all that, they're just saying that God switched up their biology so they could reproduce. It's the same kind of vibe as when people say that God saved them from some serious injury or illness, but it was really doctors doing all the heavy lifting. So, God probably prevented any careless mistakes from happening and guided doctors to make the right call and had your body lean towards recovery. But God didn't physically save you all by himself. He used other people to do it. It was like a team effort. So probably Abraham is in fact the biological father, and God just helped them get there in that miracle leaning kind of way. That's the assumption of Christian scholars, and it's probably an accurate one. I want to make sure you hear and space accurate. I just wish that there were more easily accessible articles that could explain why Isaac is not divine conception like is implied, as that would make him at least partially a god, and that just can't be a thing. I know it's not a thing in Christian theology, but I'm annoyed I don't have the evidence for why it's definitely not an accurate depiction. So if anyone knows the deets on that, let me know. But jumping off that, Isaac is still in a way a reflection of the Messiah. So, he's the special promised son. He was born from a miraculous conception. The mothers were given a heads up before their arrival and told what to name them. And most importantly, they were both brought into existence in order to fulfill a covenant. The only real difference is that Isaac failed to hold up his end of that covenant, while Jesus succeeded. But that was to be expected. If you remember the covenant video from the Bible Project, which I'll link below if you don't, but you'll recall that Abraham and Isaac and later Jacob were the start of the old covenant, which was an agreement between God and these chosen people to follow these rules and God, if they follow the rules, then God can create a new Eden for them. But they kept not following those rules, so God could never create a new Eden for them. Hence why he had to send in Jesus to fulfill the law and then sacrifice himself. So anyone who pulled the Jesus card could be a part of the new Eden, like they themselves were Jesus. So they're seen as clean, even though they're not. But because they're like, hey, but like Jesus, they're like, okay, fine, you're saved. So Eden was never exclusive to Jewish people. It was always open to everyone, which I think we touched on in the last study. But the Jews were chosen so they could not only show the world why they needed Jesus, why they were not qualified to fulfill the covenant, but also to act as a specially curated group that God could insert himself into and become that Messiah that does end up fulfilling that covenant. And that's not to say that God was just waiting for the Jews to fail so he could swoop in and be the hero, a little savior complex. I think if Jesus sweating blood in the garden that one time tells us anything, it's that he did not want to have to be the one to fulfill the covenant if he didn't need to. I think he hoped Isaac, Jacob, Moses, like someone within the Jewish faith would be able to follow those laws perfectly. So much so that he gave it about 2,000 years before being like, fine, I'll do it myself. And he knew that was going to happen, but he wanted to give us a chance to like, it was kind of like for our benefit, like, hey, like, see, this is why you need me, but also like, maybe if you can do it, then I won't have to. I think it was like a little balance of that. He was hoping he'd be wrong, you know? But I think it's better this way because had a mere human been able to successfully follow the laws, then it would have been proven that people can be perfect, and that would be the bar to enter the New Eden. Instead, we got Jesus, who was fully God and fully man, and he showed that someone with that kind of divinity could be perfect, and like thus that's only God can be perfect. So thus the bar was lowered to those who believe that Jesus in fact lowered the bar for us. That's a bit of a tangent though. I was just trying to make the parallels between Isaac and Jesus, and it just took me down this long winding road. So let's just be grateful that to God that perfection is not required of us, and finally move on to the next verse, which is, so Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, just as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. Sarah said, God has made me laugh. All who hear about our good news will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham and Sarah that Sarah would nurse children? Oh my goodness. For I have given birth to a son by him in his old age. So Isaac, which means one who laughs or rejoices, becomes the perfect name for this child of a geriatric couple, as Sarah notes. Playing a little bit more off the parallels between Isaac and Jesus, I think you could also take this a little bit more cynically. Isaac is meant to be the first of this covenant between God and the people, but he will be unable to fulfill his end of the deal, as will 99.999% of his descendants. So the idea that he will usher in a new utopia for humanity is a bit of a joke. It's really foreshadowing, not just for how long they'd have to wait for the Messiah, as Abraham and Sarah had to wait for Isaac, but also for the laughingstock that the Jews will become completely through their own fault of being fallen humans like the rest of us. But Jesus will redeem the Jews by joining them and becoming the savior that they were meant to be. So no longer a joke of perfection, but salvation, which is what Jesus' name means. God is salvation. Jesus still kept the ridiculous origin story by being born in a manger, but gotta stay true to one's roots, so it's just amusing of mine. Excuse me. Let's continue into the nitty-gritty, which is, the child Isaac grew and was weaned, and Abraham held a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. Now, as time went on, Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking Isaac. Therefore she said to Abraham, drive out this maid and her son, for the son of this maid shall not be an heir with my son Isaac. Notice real quick how she calls Ishmael the son of this maid, instead of what he was originally. which was Sarah's own adopted son. Hagar was meant to be just like an egg donor, according to Sarah's own plan. But the moment that plan backfired on her, and especially once she got her own son, now Ishmael is Hagar's son alone. And, she just rejects them both completely. So it's a wonder why Ishmael was acting out. Anyways, the verse continues. The situation distressed Abraham greatly because of his son Ishmael. God said to Abraham, "Do not let it distress you because of Ishmael and your maid. Whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her, and do what she asks. For your descendants will be named through Isaac, and I will also make a nation of Ishmael, the son of the maid, because he is your descendant." So Abraham got up early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, putting them on her shoulder, and gave her the boy, and sent her away. And she left, but lost her way, and wandered aimlessly in the wilderness of Beersheba. So going back a little, there is some debate as to when weaned is for Isaac. A lot of ancient traditions keep it between maybe like 5 or 12, but most scholars agree that for Isaac it was 3 years old. So Ishmael was probably around 16 when this happened. Of course, if he was older, Sarah's reaction to his teasing would have been like maybe a little bit more understandable. He is a full adult picking on a little kid. So I still don't know that I'd banish him and his mom into the desert for that. But I would agree it's worse if he's older. But this behavior makes a lot more sense for a dumb teenager. He was likely jealous of all the attention Isaac was getting, especially from Sarah, who I get the sense was always a bit of a bitch to both him and his mother. He probably felt very threatened by this more legitimate heir, even though he was here first. He technically was a bastard after Isaac's birth. So it's still not right to taunt innocent children, but like most bullies, the motivations behind it are understandable, but not reasonable. So it doesn't excuse it, but it does explain it. So Sarah was also being a bit oversensitive and protective. Excuse me. Just throwing out a teen and his mother into the wilderness, never to return, just for saying mean things to his younger half-brother, as most sibling rivalries would require. On the flip side, the word for mocking used here generally means just what you'd think it means, but there are some uses that imply more of a sexual humiliation. So there's a small chance that Ishmael was sexually harassing Isaac or dominating him in some way. So that would make Sarah's indignation a lot more reasonable. But most scholars agree that he was keeping it in the verbal realm, nothing physical, being a dick, not using his dick, if you will. I personally think this fits more with the character that we've seen of this family unit. Hagar or Ishmael be getting all snooty patooty, and Sarah be tripping and overreacting. Let's not forget when Sarah flipped on Hagar just because she was giving her the stink eye. And Ishmael definitely seems to have inherited that sass. So I'd say Sarah banishing Hagar and Ishmael to the wilderness because Ishmael was being rude seems on point for these three. One does have to wonder, though, if Sarah wasn't such a bitch, and if Hagar and Ishmael weren't at worst, snobs. And there's like some translations that are like they're not snobs, they're actually victims. So, but like worst case scenario, if they weren't such snobs, if these guys would have ever been able to live together peacefully, it does seem to be mostly Sarah overreacting, to be clear, but Hagar and Ishmael do seem to egg it on a little. If they could just both stop and be the bigger person, maybe it would have been maybe it could have turned into like a healthy co-parenting relationship, but instead it got so toxic that they just had to split for their own mental health and safety. Sometimes things just get so hostile, there's just no fixing it, and it's better to just part ways and never see each other again. Even when they're both faithful to God, they can't show kindness to another believer, or even just like modest politeness, whatever that word is. Maybe in the new Eden, those prejudices slip away and the hatchet can finally be buried. I personally find that uncomfortable if fellow believers that you don't like are gonna be in heaven with us. I don't like that thought, because I can think of people I do not want to bump into in the new Eden, but maybe it won't matter as much when I'm there, but I still hold the right to hate that idea in my fleshy state, but there's a chance of that. It's one of those things I gotta contend with. Either way, Abraham was conflicted with sending his firstborn and baby mama into the wilderness as his wife wanted, as any self-respecting father would, but God knew the living situation wasn't sustainable, so he let Abe know that it was all cool, he'll take care of them. That's what I mean when I say don't leave until God says so. A lot of people in toxic relationship struggle with whether to stay or work it out, or just leave. Sometimes it can be worked out, and maybe when Hagar initially tried to leave, there was a chance of that, or maybe there was still something to be learned or gained from staying, but at a certain point, there was nothing else to do but leave, and only God knows when that point is. And now Hagar can leave, as she always wanted to, but this time with her head held high, knowing she's not running away from a problem, but doing as God commanded. Though I do feel the need to point out, if you are in a situation that is physically or emotionally violent, it's best to just leave immediately and wait for God's further instructions in a safe place. Your life shouldn't be in danger when you're waiting for God's guidance, if you don't need to be. Just like an FYI. I will link a directory of shelters in the description if you don't know where to go in those situations, but either way, after this humbling period with Abraham and Sarah, it was time for a new chapter in their life to rely solely on God instead of Abe. So let us now see how these two managed to rely on God after yet another rough patch in the wilderness in the next verse, which is: when the water in the skin was gone, Hagar abandoned the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went and sat down opposite him, about a bow shot, which is about 50 yards, less than a tennis court for the uninformed, but a bow shot away, for she said, "Do not let me see the boy die." I will say, it was nice of Hagar to put Ishmael in the shade as they died of thirst. That's a baller mother move. Of course, it's preferred that a mother is with her child when they die, but I don't think we can hold her abandoning him against her. Grief comes in many forms, and it's not uncommon for people to choose to not be around the dying in those last moments, like when all hope is lost. Like, would you want to watch helplessly as your only child, died? Like, I don't think so. So don't be so judgy, okay? Everyone's just doing the best that they can. Though I have heard, I'm not sure, I've never done it myself, but I've heard that dying is a lonely business, so company is generally preferred. So if you can be with a dying person, I'd recommend it for their sake, not yours. But anyways, let's get to the happy ending in the next verse, which is: And as she sat down opposite him, she raised her voice and wept. God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What troubles you, Hagar? Do not be afraid, for God has heard the voice of the boy from where he is. Get up, help the boy up, and hold him by the hand, for I will make him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the empty skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with Ishmael, and he grew and developed, and he lived in the wilderness and became an expert archer. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Going back to the roots in Egypt. So we're not sure if Hagar got like magic water that God poofed into existence, or if he just led her to where some water was, but either way, he provided. This actually makes me think of the woman at the well story, where Jesus tells this woman of magic spirit water that will keep her from ever thirsting again. It wasn't the first time that God led a thirsty woman to water, is all I'm saying. But like most things in the Bible, the Old Testament deals more with guidance towards physical treasures, while the New Testament deals with the spiritual treasures that last forever. I also wonder if this could be a metaphor for the things people give us versus the things God gives us. Abraham gave very limited supplies to Hagar and Ishmael, bogged down by his wife, while God gave freely and abundantly. Even though Ishmael was not a part of God's chosen people, he was still a child of God, as we all are. And God said he would take care of him and Hagar, so he did. So God does what he says and says what he means, simple as that. Now, Ishmael and Hagar end up in Paran, which is somewhere around Saudi Arabia or Egypt, south of Israel, either way. This is, ironically, where the future Israelites will spend some time wandering in for those 40 years. So Abraham's firstborn descendants conquer and thrive in the wilderness that Abraham's secondborn descendants struggle in. So I guess there's some poetic justice for Ishmael there. Either way, God kept his promise to take care of Hagar and Ishmael and would give him a formidable nation, comparable to the Jewish one, except missing that one link to the Messiah. But enough about that. Let's go back to see how Abraham's doing in the next verse, which is, "Now at that time Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, said to Abraham, 'God is with you in everything you do. So now swear to me here, by God, that you will not deal unfairly with me by breaking any agreements we have, or with my son, or with any of my descendants. But as I have treated you with kindness, you shall do the same to me, and to the land in which you have sojourned.'" Sojourned. That's such a funny word. "And Abraham said, 'I will swear.'" So quick context for this. Abimelech is actually less of a personal name and more of a title for a king, like with Pharaoh, but like the Philistine version. So there's some debate as to whether this Abimelech is the same one that kidnapped Sarah a couple of chapters ago, especially since Gerar isn't mentioned here specifically. But most agree it is in fact the same one, and it makes sense that it is. Why else would this king just pop up on this strange foreigner to praise his God and ask for an alliance? Like, clearly he has some prior experience with Abe and his very scary God, and he'd rather be on their good side. So Abimelech wants to make sure he's not going to get any more trouble from Abe, and maybe even get some side blessings by treating a clearly powerful God's people nicely. And Abe just wants to be friends with everyone, like the fucking Labrador that he is. So he agrees to this alliance. But Since they're allies now, Abe feels he can bring up the well incident. What is the well incident, you ask? Well, pun intended, let's find out in the next verse, which is, then Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water which the servants of Abimelech had violently seized from him. Abimelech said, I did not know who did this thing. Indeed, you did not tell me, and I did not hear of it until today. So, Gerar is a pretty deserty place, so people rely on well water pretty heavily. And since Abraham and Abimelech established a friendship, it seemed like a good time to bring up the fact that Abimelech's servants stole a well that Abe dug for himself. So if Abimelech wanted to be allies, why would he let his servants steal Abe's well? Well, as it turns out, Abimelech had no idea this had happened. Likely the servants didn't know who Abe was and just saw a dirty foreigner trying to take up valuable real estate. And it's a good thing Abe cleared that up, because that could have escalated into a wrath of God kind of situation. So it's good thing. It's good to talk things out amongst friends, before things get out of hand, especially in new friendships, if you speak now or forever hold your peace. So what was the resolution of this complaint? Let's find out in the last verse. So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two made a covenant. Then Abraham set apart 7 ewe lambs of the flock, and Abimelech said to Abraham, What is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs which you have set apart? And Abraham said, You are to accept these 7 ewe lambs from me as a witness for me that I dug this well. Therefore that place was called Beersheba, well of the oath, or well of the 7 eels, because the two of them swore an oath. So they made a covenant at Beersheba. Then Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, got up and returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree at Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord in prayer, the eternal God, and Abraham lived as a resident alien in the land of the Philistine for many days. So the sheep and the ox mentioned were likely used for a covenantal sacrifice, which we've described in the Genesis 15 study, to cut up a covenant, the price and binding of a deal. And the 7 ewes, I should just say lambs. That's just such an awkward word. Ewes. I don't know how to say that without it sounding weird. Anyways, these 7 eels were meant as a signing bonus to compensate for the well, and also as a receipt for Abe's purchase of said well. So it doesn't actually say Abimelech gave the well to Abraham, but that's the assumption, and everyone came away with something because of it. So it's important not to be cheap in deals such as these. It's important not to be cheap in these deals, because, angry allies or like ones that feel stiffed tend not to be very helpful. You know the saying, happy allies keep you alive. So Beersheba, moving on, becomes an important landmark as well. Sorry, I didn't say that right. Beersheba becomes an important landmark as well. And it's often used in the descriptive phrase from Dan to Beersheba, which means all of Israel from north to south. Similar to the phrase from California to the New York Isles. Every time I hear that part, I just gotta sing the whole thing. So I'm gonna resisting for the Lord. So Isaac will later redig it and put an altar there. Jacob will rest there while journeying through the promised land, and it comes under the jurisdiction of the Simon and Judah tribes and gets a town built around it at some point. Same name. Samuel's sons will become judges there. King Saul will protect it from the Amalekites. Elijah will hide from Jezebel there. And lastly, it gets a notable mention from Amos in his rant about idolatry. Always crazy how legacies end, huh? So tamarisk trees, by the way, just another quick note, they're very pretty, flowery trees, and they take a long time to grow. So Abe planting one there signifies his trust that this alliance will last long enough for the tree to grow, putting roots down, if you will. Probably also he trusts God to ensure that it will last. And being a wise old man now, he praises God for resolving the conflict. Likely the everlasting tree is also a nod to the everlasting God, which is why it got emphasized in the verse. So it's obvious to pray to God in times of trouble, but don't forget to thank him when he pulls through for you. Maintain open lines of communication before, during, and after every event when you can. It helps your brain. And another thing that sometimes I kind of have trouble with is talking to God when there's like absolutely nothing going on, nothing got finished, nothing is happening. Like, I'm just like, hey God, everything's fine, I guess. There's nothing really to report. So, I guess thanks for the boringness. But, it's makes the prayers like awkward. I feel like, I'm just like, I feel like I should pray for something, but I don't know. Maybe I should just, I'm like, how are you, God? How are you doing? But anyways, on that note, we shall end this study and move on to the prayer time. And I haven't really heard super much from anyone. We're still going to pray for our cousin who, dealing with the grief, and her GoFundMe is in the description. I think the whole thing with my dad I already thanked God for in the last episode. So we're not going to pray for my dad. We're going to pray for Dr. Heiser and Trey, who seem to be recovering from their health issues. At least Trey is. We're still not sure about, it's cancer. So, it's kind of 50-50. What did I hear from my mother? She called me recently, but I was like running. So I was like kind of distracted, but I think she's doing good now, so I guess we can thank God for things being good for her. And we're also definitely going to pray for Mia, who seems to be having a very bad day today. So there's that. And then for myself, I've actually been kind of depressed lately, and like especially anxious. I just keep getting like, I've just been extra sensitive. A lot of looping thoughts of worthlessness and like nothing's ever gonna get better and everybody hates me, that kind of vibe. So I guess I'll pray for that somehow, but that's the prayer requests. So we're gonna do those now. So hey God, how's it going? I just wanted to thank everyone for bringing all the people here that wanted to be here or just happened to be here. Thank you for making them watch the whole video. I appreciate that. I also want to pray for my cousin who's still dealing with the grief, and also her son who's dealing with the grief with her. I just pray that they're able to get through that with their with at least a good chunk of their sanity in check. It is very unlikely their lives will ever go back to normal after this, but the closest you can get to normalcy, or at the very least a new kind of better life. I don't even know if better is the right word, but just kind of guide them through that, help them navigate that emotional maze of grief. I also want to pray for Dr. Heiser and Trey, that their health issues clear up. They do very important work, and it would be such a travesty if either of them died, but especially Dr. Heiser. Like, Trey's important too, but he's a lovable goof, he makes the podcast light, but let's be real, but Dr. Heiser is also very important. I don't want to compare the two, but I definitely would not want any of them to die, either of them. So let's just leave it at that. Let's just keep them from dying. Okay? Okay. I also want to pray for Mia, who seems to be kind of going through it right now. Not just with the stuff with the car and stuff, but just generally she seems to be very depressed. A lot of stuff going on with her family and whatever drama. So I just pray that she is able to also navigate through that, recovering from all of her various toxic relationships. Much like Hagar, I just pray that you will lead her to the spiritual waters and make a great nation out of her, but like not really a nation, but you know what I mean. Just give Mia some blessings, guide her out of Beersheba. I'd also like to pray for my mother, who I think she's doing good now. I probably should have made a note of it, but I'm pretty sure she's okay now. She seems like she's doing a lot better. She got a new job and stuff. So I guess thank you for making things better for her. And make it continue to be better. Okay? Okay. And also for myself, I've definitely been dealing with some mental health issues lately. A lot of trauma and possible mental disorders that I'm hoping I can get treatment for soon. But until that appointment that I have to go to, I just pray I don't do anything too crazy, and also after the appointment, I hope I don't do anything too crazy. I just pray that the treatment that I'm seeking has some kind of efficacy. And I just pray that you also remind me that I am not alone in this world. It's not just me forever alone. Like, I do have people that care about me, and that's definitely including you, God. You are always here. You're always ready to lend a comforting hand. So I just pray that you don't let me forget you and all the other people that I can talk to about things. So just pray for that. And I think that's about it. I hope you're doing good, God. I'm sure you're about the same. It's kind of bittersweet vibes all the time. But I just you're cool. So stay cool, I guess. Okay, well, I guess I'll go now. Okay, bye, man. Okay, we're done with the praying now. So yeah, if you have any questions or comments or prayer requests, either like the thankful kind or the I need help kind, let me know in the comments, or you can DM me, I guess, but mostly just mention it in the comments. I'd like to close out the Bible study with a loud worship song, and I'm extra excited about this one because it's actually my dad's song. It's a very old song, like I think it was on his first or second album. I don't know. It's probably on his second. Maybe it was his first. I don't know. It was on one of his first albums, and it's quite the pumper. And I think it's a great song to close out this study. So, for those watching on YouTube, go into the link of the description and click on that link and listen to my father's amazing music. And for those watching on Facebook, scroll up, okay? Cool. All right, well, I'll see you guys next week. Okay, bye.